All right, guys. A lot of you throw around the term battle rifle like it means something. Well, it's a stupid term. Do you agree with that?
It's kind of a stupid term. It's one of those where, like, Ian McMustache-Face said once from a Forgotten Weapons video that, like, he correctly identified, like, it's not a well-defined term. Like, assault rifle sort of has a definition, but even then, no, it doesn't really.
Yeah.
But, battle rifle is one that, like, certainly doesn't actually have a real definition. People have taken it to mean that it's a full power as opposed to intermediate power, because, like, what does full power mean? Does it mean something between 308 and 50 cal? I don't know. Like, full power is kind of foggy, where intermediate's sort of well-defined.
Right.
Stuff for battle rifles isn't very well-defined. But, it's ostensibly a full power cartridge, generally in a semi-automatic rifle, but it could also be maybe select fire in some instances.
Right.
But it's just like a big assault rifle is what people have taken it to mean, which is kind of goofy.
Well, so we're going to do the battle of the bad battle rifles.
The bad battle rifles.
And so today we've got my submission.
This is perhaps one of even the most understood battle rifles, rifles in general.
It's certainly one of the rifles of all time
out there. It's also an example of one of the greatest glow downs in the history of rifles. Like,
glow down?
If you've heard of, like, a glow up, it's like,
what the hell? No.
Like,
what is that?
It's like whenever you grow up, but then you get more glamorous. A glow up. This is an example of a glow down, where you have the M1 Garand, and it's going places, it's doing things. It was not a by the end of the Second World War, it was starting to be a little bit dated design wise. But, like, it was a solid foundation, and certainly, no matter who you talk to, I don't care about these idiots, these morons who are like, well, rifles didn't make a difference in infantry firepower in World War II. That's retarded. It's frankly retarded. I don't care. Like, it's one of those things where, like, maybe it's reductionist, but, like, would you rather be fighting a guy with this or a 98K? Like Mausers, I'd rather have this. 9 times.
Wait, what do you mean this? You mean a Garand?
A Garand.
Yeah, not this.
Not this. I'd rather have the ancestor of
right.
And then at the end of the war, we're in search of something with more capacity. We want magazines and these sorts of things. And the United States decides that the best way to accomplish that is hold trials and then pick the rifle that loses.
It lost.
It's the loser of the trials. It's the loser gun, the ultimate big time loser gun.
So this is of course, it's not an M14. It's a Springfield Armory Model 1 Amigo National Scratch. But it does have a lot of the features of the M14 that make it a bad gun.
That's true.
And so we're going to talk about this today. And I'll tell you, first of all, I like the M1 Garand.
I do too. The only thing that you can complain about is the open top receiver, but that's if we're comparing it to modern guns.
Yeah.
Right? The fact that it can be compared to modern guns.
Oh, and the cyclic rate is faster than the AR-15. Oh, don't forget that.
Well, you know what? It's proof that Canadians are capable of doing good sometimes. They can sometimes do something right.
Yeah. So the Garand it's not a perfect design. People like to tout the fact that the whole thing is made of tool steel. It's kind of retarded.
It's fair.
Yeah.
Like the operating, you can tell that they were again in that throwing crap at the wall and seeing what sticks phase of gun design, where they didn't know exactly how they were going to make auto-loading guns work, and so you can very easily see in the M1 action in general, the Garand M14, Mini 14s, and derivatives there, the M1 carbine even. That what they really designed was a bolt-action rifle that just has a bingus that taps gas off the barrel, and that bingus, that operating rod, just sort of like it lifts and then pulls back what is ostensibly like if you welded a bolt handle onto this thing's bolt, you cannot tell me that it just wouldn't.
So no, what it is, you know what it is? It's a Mauser 98 bolt that's been run over with a steamroller.
Right.
Like, see?
Like it's a it wouldn't be a maniacal setup just to have a bolt handle off the side there and you go troink, 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 troink. Like, it would actually kind of be a cool gun. I want to.
And then as we try to close it slowly, we see one of the issues with it being just a bolt action. Doesn't want
to pop into place all.
Oh, and that.
And of course, the worst thing. This was something that I think they'd end up trying to address, but the flash hider is a tuning fork, and it rings obnoxiously loud. Anytime the rifle's touched, it rings. You can slap it. It rings.
But the worst is when the bolt releases.
It's loud.
It's so loud you hear it while you're shooting.
Yes. You can hear it with hearing protection on, especially if your head's on the gun. You feel like it does the bone conducting thing off your cheek. You hear it ring.
Yep. And this...
People talk about sproing in AR-15 rifle stocks. Like, oh, the spring, you can hear the spring vibrate. Yeah, that's nothing. This is actually awful.
And this is, again, and we've talked about moment, right? So your barrel is connected back here. This is as much of a lever arm as you can get right up here. And
it keeps your whole barrel vibrating for like 3 seconds after your shot.
Yep.
It is impossible for that to be good for accuracy.
Yep. I will say, though, the National Scratch does have everything dialed in the way you could reasonably expect. Like the trigger.
The trigger's not bad.
Even you fucking pull the trigger in. The trigger is... No, it's not bad. It's good. It's got the hooded rear sight. It's... Here.
If we go... Pretty long take up.
It's good.
Maybe like a 4-pound break. I mean, for competition rifle triggers, I'm not going to say it's good.
No.
There's $100 AR drop-ins that are like run rings around it. But if this was the trigger they put in combat rifles,
which is not
better than most combat rifle triggers. And so there's an interesting thread that you can pull on when you talk about Springfield Armory, right? Because this gun was designed by Springfield Armory, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Springfield Armory makes, don't they?
No.
Springfield Armory makes the M1A, right?
Asterisk?
Springfield Armory makes the M1A. The two different Springfield Armory. Completely.
Yeah.
Springfield Armory, the government-run arsenal. So back before the AR-15 was really the gun that changed this forever. It was the gun that shut down the government-run Springfield arsenal. The government designed its own guns. The AR-15 paradigm shifted that like massively, and the government was very resistant to it, like at every level. Even within the military, they didn't want that to happen. But it was a really good choice.
Especially within the military, because guess what? Pumping that pork barrel, stealing that money, and taking it home to your home state, Mr. Congress Lizard.
Right.
So, yeah.
But the original government Springfield Armory was a totally different entity than the Springfield Armory we have. The one we have today that just like imports weird guns from horrible,
Croatia.
Like horrible guns from horrible countries that you
Here, grab one of those. That's the level of build quality from the current Springfield Armory.
It's like it's a Walther P-38.
It's just sick. Yeah, it's a Walther P-38. He's just sick.
He's had too much to drink.
He's got to pray for him.
one thumbs up on the videos, one prayer for our sick
for our sick P-38. Please help him.
But the modern Springfield Armory just straight up stole the name, and it has confused Grand Boomers ever since, because they think that the Springfield Armory are grand.
American.
That's where they designed them. No. For the longest time, Springfield Armory was saying they had made in the USA 1911s that were all parts imported from Brazil, just built here. And so it was like said made in USA, because for the FFL stuff, yeah, it is. But for actually, no. And so there's a guy whose YouTube channel, and I forget the name, but I've watched his videos, showed up my recommended, and I've watched a bunch of them. And he's got some good opinions. But one of his opinions that I think was valid, and I wish I remembered his name so you guys could go watch the video. His conclusion on the M1A is that it's gravely misunderstood because the military guns were a cut above what you can buy for civilian guns from a standpoint of, did they freaking break? These are fragile. Lots of people have had bolts shear off, things fall apart. I've got a friend who has the same thing but in the synthetic stock, the National Scratch M1A. He was using a Winchester White Box 308. One got stuck in the chamber, and we weren't even able to mortar it open. We ended up having to get a hammer, because it's a live round, and the hammer's down, and we're sitting there thinking, I don't trust this firing pin to be mortaring on it too hard. So we ended up having to like put it in a vise and point it away from us and go with a rubber hammer and just go, to beat the gun open. Horrible experience. Just getting that Springfield build qualities. It's just not the best. And he was alleging, this guy with the video is alleging, the government guns were significantly better than the civilian guns, and that if you wanted a real honest-to-goodness GI spec M14, they're really good guns, and they're accurate, and they're reliable, and they last a super long time, and you don't have to clean them, and they don't have horrible zero shift when you take them out of their stocks. And then he went and showed his gun that exemplified this, and it's got a Krieger barrel, That's not GI spec. A drop-in trigger, a custom trigger job, that's not GI spec. Had a different rear sight that wasn't GI spec, like nothing on his...
And what was the receiver? Did he re-weld it?
No, so the company that makes them uses forged billets that are very close to what Springfield was using. I forget what the company is, but it's like a $4,000 custom order M1.
Very
M14.
gay.
Yeah, so it's very gay. And like he kept saying, like GI spec guns don't have these problems, and his gun isn't even remotely close.
I do remember M14 guys are, I will say, like, you know, in terms of, because some of you guys might not know this, but me and Ivan are car guys, and there are like certain classes of car guys that are just the worst, like BMW guys. Yeah. They're always looking down on you, right? Because they're always like, push rods. And it's like, okay, bitch.
At least our blinkers work. At least somebody would know if our blinkers work.
But M14 guys are subhuman. Like the ones that like have a real one, and it's never real. Right. And because I remember the first time I met an M14 guy, this was when I was in Alabama, and I had just got my Garand. I went to the CMP. It was a nice experience, right? Got my Garand, was shooting it at the public range, and this guy, I had put a bunch of cans at the 100-yard line and was shooting them with my Garand. This guy to my right was shooting at my cans and missing them. And he finally stands up during a ceasefire and he's like, oh, haha, yeah, that's cute, looking at my Garand. He's like, you ever shoot the good one? And he points to his M14, you know, which has, it's one of those, right? And he was talking about how he built it and this and that. And I was like, okay. And again, this guy has been shooting at my cans at 100 yards.
Right.
And so he's like, here, you try it. And I take it. And he gives me 3 rounds in the magazine because that's how loaded he is, right? Like this is in 2016. So this guy's loaded. Gives me 3 rounds of 308. And I just off the shoulder, aim it at 100 yards, shoot 2 of my cans, and then I hand it back with one in the chamber going, that's okay. And it fucked his day up, dude. Because he couldn't hit shit with his own gun. But I will say, it shot fine. It shot completely fine. It felt a lot like the Garand.
Right. And I would shake the M14 down to why would it be a bad gun? I'd shake it down to 4 things. The first is, generally the issue, especially with the Springfield guns, they just tend to be unreliable, and it's just like the usual Springfield crap, where like they don't know how to make springs right.
Damn.
So there's extractor spring issues, there's action spring issues, like we just saw, like the gun won't close on its own bolt unless you like slingshot it. That's not right. Not supposed to be like that. Like Grands aren't that way. I've never seen a Grand behave that way.
No, Grands don't.
I'm sure somebody out there has one that's shit.
Put it in the cope section.
Yeah, let us know how crappy your Grand is. You probably made by Springfield Armory, the bad one.
Of course, or a Fed arm, Fed order, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, but I would shake it down to just generally the ones that are out there have accuracy. The ones that are out there then also have metallurgical issues.
Yep.
I think Springfields are probably the least bad about this, at least from what I've seen and/or
because they are at least a real company.
Right. Where there's ones that like guys that are doing cast receiver guns that end up having receivers crack. Like there's pictures of ones where like the whole rear of the receiver breaks off. And I think it was Battlefield Vegas had a Garand that they had like 100,000 rounds through that had that same break happen, and that's about what you'd expect. Yeah. These new knockoff crappy cast M1A, M14 clones are like 1,000 rounds. Your receiver fails catastrophically because that piece of the receiver is coming at you when that breaks off.
Is the M1A cast?
M1A should be forged. Maybe somebody knows better in the cope section, but.
Yeah, go ahead and write it.
The M14 is meant to be a forged receiver, just like the Grand receiver. And this is something that was very, very contentious at the time, where the Army was promising the Springfield Armory, the government one, was promising the government and the Army they'd be able to make the M14 and it'd be super cheap, and that we shouldn't adopt the FAL because we can make the M14 and it'll be much cheaper. And here's the reason why: it's because we can reuse Garand tooling. We can basically use all the old Garand tooling over again, the same forging dies. We basically already paid for the gun. They end up using none of the Garand tooling making the gun because they realize they can't, and then there's features they have to cut in it that aren't going to work because the Garand is a substantially different gun in the receiver. So they end up using...
because the Garand has almost all of its operating mechanism running off of the recoil spring, including the magazine.
Right.
Which is just not going to work here.
And so they ended up having to substantially redesign things and make all new forging tools, which It's very expensive to do, and then the funny thing is it's expensive to do, and then it's even harder to do right. Where like there's companies in the U.S. that have done forged AK trunnions, and then they blow up. It's because the process doesn't mean that it's a good part. And you especially see this, totally different gun, but with the Browning high powers, where they ended up having forged high power frames, and they'd crack, while the cast high power frames wouldn't crack, which is a very weird thing. But it's because the forged ones forged in a direction such that it would split between the layer lines, if you will, of the forging. Whereas the cast guns have a completely random grain structure, which is perfect. Right? It's strong enough that way. Whereas the forged grain direction wasn't.
Right.
So just because you forge a part doesn't mean that it's forged well. Doesn't mean that it's going to operate great. But certainly in the case of M14s, the way that it's designed, the way everything, the sizes and shapes of all of the parts that get beat on hard were done so with it being forged in a particular manner, with a particular grain direction, with a particular steel.
Yeah, they thought pretty hard about it.
Yes, it was one of those guns where it was like a try-hard gun development, where it's not like, guns nowadays are like, we take the AR-18 bolt, everybody's figured that out already. AR-18 gas system or slight derivative of that.
What if I put this upside down?
Yeah, somebody's figured that out already. And so like, as far as figuring out, especially with the M14, they didn't have material allowables or data like that at all back then. So all of their figuring out how do we make this work, like they didn't have computers, they didn't have simulation. It was a lot of trial and terror, which is how you end up with bad gun.
So yeah, there's just a lot of stuff that gives you a bad user experience on this gun. I will say, this is my personal M1A National Scratch, and it has not given me any problems in the some 200 uninspired rounds I've put through it, because I got this gun and I shot it and I was like, okay, and then I put it away. I haven't shot this gun in like 7 years because I feel no reason to. But like the one thing is shooting this thing with irons, perfectly fine. Like it's a great 1, 2, even 300 yard plinker with irons. I mean, it is something more than a blinker, but you get what I'm saying. The moment you try to put an optic on this thing, though,
it freaks out.
It hates what you're doing, and it's because, look at this receiver. Where are you going to put it on? I think Springfield, the company Springfield, is on their like 5th generation of scope mount. Right, because they keep.
There's not a right way. There's not a right.
They started at 20 minutes, and then they've gone down to like 3 or 4.
Right.
It's not a gun that is ever going to be accurate. Like people will be like, but the M21. Guess what? It's military accurate.
Right, and the third sort of issue with this gun that I was going to talk about was the issue that this gun has with the accuracy, which the guy in the big M14 coat post video that he did, I think he addressed it pretty fairly, where the military guns had a significant issue where whenever you disassemble the gun for field stripping and put it back together, you're going to have accuracy shift because it's the total opposite of free floated. The Garand has the same issue though, right? In I don't know if you pointed that out in the video, but the Garand suffers from this too. Pretty much all guns of that era have that issue. Anything that's not free floated to some extent will have that issue. In fact, all of World War I, all of World War II, all of those bolt-action rifles, they got that issue, and especially the more wood you got on the barrel. And I think this was a big problem because this gun was in Vietnam. Wood is not like metal or plastic where it just sits there and behaves well.
Right.
You take wood into a humid jungle, it swells, pushes on the barrel differently. In the monsoon season, much more rainy, then there'll be periods that it's a little bit less humid, and then your wood constricts and your zero is shifted again. So I think the M14 was really shafted in that regard. And I've seen some writings to that effect that was believed to be a big part of the issue that it ran into. But certainly, it's got that trouble where putting optics on it is hard. Where I've seen people who do top covers that sort of like jack screw or clamp down on the barrel to try and get things there.
It's just never going to work. It's never going to be right.
Sort of a screwball solution. And the military has come up with chassis it's the M14 EBR or whatever, where it again had like a bunch of screws that sort of like held themselves.
And it winds up weighing like 20 pounds.
Right, it weighs 20 pounds, and then the issue that they had was taking that chassis off and then putting it back on guarantees you have accuracy issues. Where, I forget who it was that was telling me this story, but he was in Afghanistan. They got their first shipment of EBRs. First thing they did was take them apart to clean them. They then get the technical data the next day that says do not take these things apart, let the armorer do it. And they're like, huh. And, they had then gone and shot them after they'd taken them apart and cleaned them, got familiar with them, and they were like, these things shoot 10 minute of angle. But it's because the way the gun has to be put together is very particular in that
I'm sure there's a torque order, like a head gasket.
Making the M14 an accurate gun is like putting a head gasket on a car. It's like
putting a head gasket on one of those W6s.
Right. It's like or building a Swiss watch. It's just this gun kicking and screaming can be accurized, but you compare that to something like the G3, right? A contemporary. A little after,
right.
Not much after this gun, at least with the Setme C becoming the G3. The G3 is super easy to accurize in comparison. Where you can get minute of angle G3s and it costs less, it's way easier. And like the extent of the modification is maybe you'd have to change barrels depending on which G3 you got, but you weld a scope mount on it.
Right,
and it's done.
Reinforce around the trunnion.
Well, that's if you want PSG1 accuracy, but with the Swedish AK4Ds or whatever, they didn't weld any reinforcement on it. They put a scope rail on it, put a different stock on it for better recoil control, and then...
And we keep talking about that trinity, right? It's your barrel to your receiver to wherever your scope mounts, right? If all of those are solid, firm, and here, barrel's in the receiver, good. Barrel's in the receiver, good.
But there's like that caveat where if the barrel's touching other stuff besides the receiver, it might as well not be connected to the receiver because everywhere else the barrel gets pushed on and touched in harmonics, that plays into that.
Yep. And what he's talking about there is that tuning fork that's just shitting your accuracy up. So like when you have the cold bore shot, it's going to be substantially different from your follow-up shot as your tuning fork is going it's screaming. So it's just wildly problematic. But I will say, from a user experience perspective, trigger pull, great. Like honestly, shoulder feel, iron sights, great.
The fourth issue. The magazines on the M14 are
impossible.
They are dog ass. First off, they never fucking work, right?
It don't work.
It's like its contemporaries. It's like magazines had to be fit to guns, right? It's not. They didn't like interchangeable parts was a topic that most manufacturing understood at this point. Cars have had it for like since the 30s. Like you don't have to like hand fit A-arms to cars. It's not a thing really. Hasn't been for a while. Guns took a really long time to figure that out, especially for magazines, right? Like with the Setmes and G3s, there's magazines that will not work with some guns. And that's just how it goes. M14 has that problem too, but the problem with the M14 is the only reason it was adopted instead of the FAL was like, well, it's just a Garand with magazines. The Garand proved itself, it's really good. But did they make it take a good magazine?
This magazine sucks.
No, it's bad.
The FAL magazine, say what you will. It's a good mag.
Right.
It's very consistent. It has, like an AK, locking features front and back.
Right. And
here you have a little
tooth.
Yeah. And then is welded on plate. There's going to be issues.
So the insertion with an AK, this is something that the grand boomers will talk about. Well, the AK is hard to put magazines in, you have to rock and lock, and you can mag lock them, and it's so bad. And these same people will then like pretend that the M14 isn't the worst example of a rock and lock magazine that's ever existed.
Well, because it's like, it doesn't feel like rock and lock though. It's like rock and push. So
the magazine.
Oh, guess what? It's not in.
Yep.
Oh, guess what? It's still not in.
The magazine has to go like an inch up into the gun and then sort of wiggle around and like it's like a...
Because you've got this spring-loaded Douglas at the front. So you're fighting a spring before you even get to the mag catch. So hold on, let me try to actually... Okay. Let me try to take this mag out and put it back in a hurry, but not like a panic.
That was really clean. That was like the cleanest it can be done.
Yeah, and it took forever. Here, you do it.
Like compared to your
FAL, you just throw it in.
Like an AR, you can do mag changes so quick. Or an AK, if you do the little slappy, the slappy, and you can maybe do the slappy technique with this.
No, they have to go down too far. I've tried.
If you don't, if you don't mind beating the shit out of your gun. I mean, you just have to send it.
Right. But so we're very intentionally doing this, right? And we're also people who spend way too much time with guns.
And the trouble is,
and you're thinking about it as you're doing it.
You have to think about it. Untrained conscripts.
All right, so here, how about
tricky.
this? Let's do this game. Let's talk a little more about it, and then just when you say go, I have to put that mag in the gun. I have to pick it up and put it in the gun. All right, but so untrained conscripts, shit like that. 18-year-old kids with no other job
And
prospects from the
compromised shooting positions is the worst for me.
and you're peeing and scared.
Because that's the gripe I'll give
Yeah.
the AK magazines. If you're sitting go,
Right.
that's not bad. There you
Yeah,
go.
but it was still like my brain was like,
Yeah.
push it in. All right, your turn.
Like if you're I'd forgotten what I said.
You're saying if you're sitting in a compromised
Right, if you're in a compromised shooting position with an AK, because the mag has to go forward.
Right.
If you're there against cover or sandbags, and that mag's got to go forward, you've got to pull the gun back too.
But see, the thing about the AK is it's still one movement.
Right.
It's still
It's certainly
go.
still one. If you don't get a hand all the way around that mag, like with an AK, once it's on the front lug, it's just a push.
Yeah.
With this, it's a push and it's a push and a rock still.
I want to redeem myself, so you get me one more. And also, you've got the gas system all the way out there. Some people complain that it's not adjustable. I think that it's good.
What's that self-regulating? The gun still rocks your teeth. That's just sort of the M1 action thing. Is I don't.
This is the only gun that makes me aware that I have fillings.
Mini 14 kicks.
Yeah.
Mini 30 kicks. Deerfield carbine kicks. 30 carbine kicks. M1 Garand kicks. Go. There you go.
See,
The front lug is tricky.
it's not right.
The whole family of guns, it cycles violently, and a lot of that is because
The speed, and that's what people,
Right.
the autists that are sitting there saying, "Oh, it's so much better because it cycles faster in the air." That's not a feature,
Right.
Especially when your reciprocating mass is so large. It's because why is that bitch going at Mach 7?
and I think the whole reason has to do with they've got it set up for such little bolt travel
Yep.
that because again, this action dates back to a time where they didn't know what the hell they were doing.
That they weren't going to do a magazine.
Right. And they were planning on. I mean, effectively, what they were doing is designing a bolt-action rifle that's got a jerker offer built into it.
Right.
And so they sort of kept that, like, if it was me designing the M14, I would have had the receiver like this much longer and let that bolt just ride. And have something on the op rod that holds the hammer down, so you can even have the bolt override.
So you would have designed the Thompson rifle.
Yes. Where that thing's just got like 6 inches of travel. The thing would be butter smooth.
Ivan and I are of one mind, though, that we like constant recoil.
Or as close to it as you can get, because nothing about this is good. Because there are some guns that have sharp recoil impulse that are easy to control. Because that's the question of the FAL versus the G3 is FAL sharp recoil impulse. G3 is a consistent push.
And also, you guys know how we take every gun apart in this thing? I don't want to take it apart.
God, this thing is
don't want to.
It's kind of awful. Where you stick this thing, you do it there, and then it comes apart, and then your zero shifts.
Yep. Yep. And like this, let me tell you the other thing. The issue specific to, well, I don't know what kind of wood they had on the GI ones.
Right.
But the Boyd's, farm-grown walnut stalks that are on these Springfield M1As are like, this is like a 20-year-old tree. And the grains are so loose that if you look at it, the wood dents.
Right.
It's not like a Garand where you can drop it and not even notice. Like, you can see from cases hitting it, it's denting the shit out of this stalk. And guess what? Because we murdered all of our wild growth walnuts. Like the old GI stalks you would see on a Garand that are, bulletproof. That's like a 500-year-old tree.
And that was the thing with Auto 5s too.
Yeah.
Auto 5 4-ends were designed for French walnut, and all of these trees grew in groves that were like old.
Right.
And the Remington guns, some of them ended up using French walnut that was brought over.
Right.
A lot of them didn't. And after World War II, something happened in France that made their trees more different, and there weren't as many of them. Like tanks ran into them is what it looked like. Tractors ran them over as different shaped tractors.
Yeah, the tractor camp wagon 1 through 4.
And so sort of as a result of that, whenever the French walnut grove sort of ran out, Auto 5 wood quality dropped, then you see more and more of those handguards start to split because they're using younger trees that weren't, the trees that they had been using weren't planted with the intention of making auto 5 ends with them. They'd been there for a long time.
And you can tell just by looking at it. You know an old growth stock when you see it, because guess what? You don't see the grain until you like get really close.
Whereas this is like, I mean, you can feel it even.
Yeah. That's right.
M1 action, like you feel the slug here, and then you feel the slug here. It's like
Yeah.
every time.
It's certainly jerky.
Yes, it's like it's the opposite of smooth.
But there is a pleasantness to it. There is a charm.
There is a pleasantness, certainly because it's predictable, if nothing else.
Right. Yeah.
It's something you could hold down against.
Yep. But anyway, guys, this has gone on too long. I'm not taking it apart.
It's a bad gun.
M14, it's just bad.
There's a little bit redeemable here.
It's nice to shoot.
It's not a bad gun to shoot, other than it's kind of uncomfortable because the M1 action it slugs. Yeah. It's got a lot of moving mass, and it's not moving.
It's nice to shoot if you're an American and you have the built-in nostalgia.
Right. Yeah. And the thing that I'll say was most redeemable about it is, God, it does look so good.
It looks cool.
It looks so good.
Yeah, it does. And the trigger,
it's
I like the trigger. And the shoulder thing that goes up.
If these things were as cheap as Grands too, right? If you could buy one of these that works and is as durable as a Grand for like $800, it'd be a great gun. It'd be so good. Because
it's not.
It's a Grand that's a little bit, I would say, more functional. Even though these mags suck, yeah, go ahead and try reloading an en bloc as fast as you can reload this mag. I think,
okay, I'll argue with you there. I can do an en bloc a lot faster than this, as we just showed.
Really?
Yeah. Well, but I mean, the Garand was one of my first combat rifles, so
you have to
You
have to do it twice as fast as I do a 20.
Oh. Well.
I think this gun has validity. Oh, of course, it needs a scope mount. It needs an actual scope mount.
But you can't.
It needs the receiver forging to just be a flat bridge across here, and that's not going to happen.
No, because you got stripper clips.
Yeah, again, that was a real. Maybe I bet you it's because did the foul did, right?
No. Stripper clips?
I thought the foul had stripper clip.
No.
Interesting. I wonder.
The foul's got a covered receiver.
I wonder why. I wonder why they thought that was a good idea.
It's probably because they had that feature from the Garand. They were like, what if... Like, they literally SMLE'd this.
Right.
Where they were like, no, we can make it take stripper clips, look.
And dovetailing it on, just, oh my god.
It's deeply retarded.
It's very bad. There's something redeemable here. It's not the worst gun, but especially for what these things cost.
It's not the worst gun. It is gorgeous.
So charming.
But... if you sit there and like...
If you defend anything about this gun as far as especially its utility for the military, the United States military doesn't get rid of bad stuff. You know how fucking quickly it dropped this thing? Like a goddamn hot potato. This gun wasn't even actually completely adopted. We were still mostly using Garands, and you know what they were doing? Trying to fucking replace it. They were like, oh my god, it's so fucking bad. Like, the Air Force has to be the one who goes around looking for like a hell no, we're not adopting that.
Yeah.
And the AR was lucky to come along when it did, because it's an easy act to improve on.
Right.
Like you're doing stand up and the previous guy just like sits there
and farted. Yeah. The last guy just went up and just literally went, oh, I'm gonna fart today, and then shit himself. It was like, that's not a fart. He shitted his pants.
And he sort of like walks off and falls out of his pants.
Yeah. And then the AR just has to walk up and go, that guy shit. You're adopted.
How about that airline food?
Oh man. But yeah, guys, thanks for joining us. Tune in next time where we will be assaulting a gun that you may have built your personality off of.
And guess what? It's a bad gun.
It's a bad gun. Y'all take care.